Hi and welcome to this Android video on design patterns used in Android programming. And there are basically three that we're going to talk about. The first is Model View Controller. Now, Model View Controller is a design pattern and also kind of the philosophy behind the way Google put together the Android programming environment. So this is the kind of overarching pattern for the organization of all Android applications. And this is good. We are sort of forced to be in Model View Controller. Android speaks Model View Controller. The model is the data for the application. And the view is those layout XMLs or the views that we create in the activity for the user to interact with. The controller is usually represented by the activity classes in the application itself. So what Model View Controller does for us is it separates the operations on the data from the data itself and the user's view of the data. This promotes sort of best practice design principles. The classes are organized by their function. Are they part of the model? Are they part of the view? Or are they part of the controller? Each part of the design is independent, therefore, of the other two parts. So we can kind of remove things and change them and plug them back in if the controller, essentially, is well written. If the controller is well written, we can change the view. We can delegate some other programmer to change the view or to change the model, and the controller will just hum along and do things with those changes. So what I'm saying is that each part of this can be rewritten with minimal impact on the other parts if those parts, those classes, are well designed. So let's look at each one of these. The model itself is a class or a graph of classes that describes what the application is. It'll either contain or expose the data to the controller. It provides methods that operate on the data. So the model knows not only what the data is, but how the data functions. If we have a series of numbers, let's say, an array of numbers in our model, the model might contain, we would not allow the controller to calculate the average. We would put that method in the model, let's just say. And the model is instantiated and run by the controller. The model itself is typically autonomous. It doesn't need anybody else to describe the data of our application. So it only knows about itself, it knows about its data, and it knows about the operations on that data. The controller is going to instantiate the model, it's going to run the model, but the model itself has no knowledge of the controller class at all. The only exception to this in Java is delegation, where a Java program needs to know the identity of all objects at compile time. It doesn't do runtime or dynamic binding. It needs to be statically bound. So that's the only exception, and we'll talk about delegation at the end of this discussion. The view is what the application looks like, what the user sees. It's represented in two ways in Android. Either it's the static layout XML of an activity, or it's the container view of the layout, which can be manipulated in the activity through find view by ID, or in some cases it may actually be created by the activity. Remember that, for example, if we have a list activity that we want to display a list of something in, that list view created by the list activity is not actually put on the layout XML. It's created by the activity and displayed as the main view of the activity. So the view is either the static XML layout or a view subclass or layout class or something that is created by the activity. The view, again, is autonomous, meaning that it only knows about itself and its subviews. And it is instantiated and run by the controller, just like the model is, and almost never has any knowledge of its controller. The only exception to that is if we need to get if we dynamically create a view within the activity, then that view is a creature of the controller. But still, that view doesn't know about the controller. The controller knows about its view. The controller is the glue. It is the master communicator. It is the manager, if you will. It instantiates and communicates with the model and the view. The only communication linkage between the model and the view is the controller. And this is done with two design patterns that we talk about. And these are part of Model View Controller. They fit within Model View Controller. And they're called target action and delegation. So again, to stress, the model and the view don't directly communicate. We don't tell the model to go out to the view to display data. We do that through the controller. So all model view communication is done through the controller. It's conducted by the controller. Target action is what happens when the user initializes an event in the view, or the user does something in the view that needs to be responded to by the controller. And this works by the controller registering an event listener, or it has a method. In the case of a button click, we could register an on-click listener, or we could just make a method and use the Android on-click attribute in the XML. We know that. Either way, this is target action. So when a control with an event listener is done something with by the user, the registered method, which is called the action, is executed by the controller, which is called the target. So really, if you think about it, it's all the controller. The controller registers the event listener. The controller has the action method, either inside that listener or as a method that executes from the layout XML on-click attribute. The controller does it all. The action method, this is really the listener, it will make adjustments to the view. It'll send input to the model, but this is not the view talking. This is the controller talking. So this is what I mean by the view never talking to the model directly. The controller registers an event handler. It handles the view's event, or the user's event on the view. It sends data to the model. It does a lot of different things, but the view and the model can only talk through the controller. This is the way, target action is the way that data gets from the view to the model. It's the only way. So now delegation is kind of the other side. Something happens in the model that needs to be reported to the controller. The controller may change the view. It may tell the model to do something else. It can do a lot of different things. But the only way to get the model to talk to the controller is through delegation. So delegation, the idea is that something has happened in the model, or sometimes we use delegation between the view and the controller, but that's very rare. But something has happened in the model that needs attention. So this change, this thing, this event, is communicated through a Java interface. The controller implements the interface, the keyword implement and then the name of the interface, and it sets the model's delegate to itself. It sets the model's delegate thing, what the model's going to call, to this from the controller. So in Java, the model must declare that delegate object to be the type of the controller. And then it can call the controller's method through the interface. And we use an interface to make sure that everything is kept neat and clean. So an interface is a class full of virtual functions. Those methods, I said function, I meant method. Those methods are implemented by the controller. They are called by the model. So we have a virtual method that's called from the model, but the controller gets to implement it. So whenever we have one class doing something on behalf of another class, in this case, the controller doing something on behalf of the model. This pattern is called delegation, and we do it with an interface. So the model is going to call the interface method when a specific condition is reached. In the demo, we have an example of delegation in the context of model view controller with target action that fills an array. The application fills an array by having the user enter data one integer at a time. And then when the model reaches a condition that the array is full, it tells the controller that the array is full. It calls the interface method to tell the controller that the array is full. And then the controller tells the model, oh, you got a full array? Calculate the average for me and give me the result. So this is delegation. So to kind of summarize, in Android, we have an overarching design pattern that all applications adopt more or less by virtue of the fact that we're writing in the Android platform. And this is called model view controller. The model and view never directly communicate. The controller handles all the communication. Communication between the view and the controller is handled through target action. Communication between the model and the controller is handled via delegation. And that is how it works. Thank you.